Hello again, everybody. This is Derek, and I am coming back at you with another Wargaming and miniature video. In today's video, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be making some plowed fields. And this method can be used for either, for any scale, right? So what we're going to do is, I'm going to get out a couple of pieces of felt, different textures. You can see that this one is super soft and flexible, and this one is a little bit more sturdy and stiff, right? So this is going to be, we're going to make a couple of plowed fields with each type of felt, and then we'll see the results at the end. We'll compare them, and yeah, it should be exciting. Okay, so these, now as you know, I make my personal fields that I need are for my 15 millimeter miniatures. So I'm either, they can be used for Napoleonics, American War of Independence, World War II, anywhere, medievals, anywhere where they would have plowed fields. These are too big, right? These are like 8.5 by 11s, or in this case, it's not even 8.5. It's just 8, if I remember right. It is 8 by almost 12. 8 by 12. It's weird. It's like a European measurement. All right, so, but this would be too big of a field to put on the table. Actually, it wouldn't be too big. It's just that I personally want smaller fields. So what I'm planning on doing is taking my knife, and I'm just going to cut this in half. No, I'm not. I'm going to use my scissors just to make an easy cut. Now, in half, I'm not measuring it. It's not important. That is not important, because I can tell right now that field just a little bit smaller than that field, and who cares? Now what I would like to do is, just to make it more agreeable appearance wise, I'm going to trim around the edges just to round them off a little bit. You don't have to do that. You can leave them square if you wish. I just want to do a round edge because I'm funny like that. 2 stiff plowed fields. Let me set those off to the side. Now I'm going to do the exact same thing with this soft felt. Same size and everything. Well, this one just happens to be 8.5 by 11, right? Nope, it's 12 by 9. Okay. Again, splitting it. There we go. You can see how soft and flexible these are. Now this video is going to take a couple of days to record because of dry times. But don't worry, I will edit. I did 3 edges already? Okay. I will edit that into one video. Alright, so we have our 4 plowed fields, various sizes. These are a little bit longer than these. I don't care. And we'll move on to the next step. Okay, so now before we get started, I want to lay down some wax paper because I'm going to be making a mess. And I don't want this to be sticking or anything to my table. So we've got a couple of flexible fields. And we have a couple of stiff fields. Okay, maybe I didn't make it big enough. Dang. All right, so we need a little bit more. All right, so we got a couple of stiff, we got a couple of flexibles, we got enough wax paper down to cover the entire thing. Okay, so we're going to be covering these fields with some Alex Plus, right? Which is an acrylic latex plus silicone. I've already got one loaded up in my gun. Now, I've already used quite a bit of this. I think I've only got about this much left. That's why I've got this second one here. If we need it, we'll open it up and we'll get that going. Now, before we get started, I want to let you know that I took a piece of cardboard and I took my scissors and I cut some teeth into it. Right? So, I made myself a little plowed field tool. And I got a bowl with just a little bit of water, just enough water to wet my fingers. Now I need to take this glove off so that I can use my fingers because with those gloves, it gets all over the place. Okay, so let's just do one of these. Okay, that was 2 full squeezes of the gun. Wet my fingers. Okay, I can get this out of the way. Wet my fingers with some water just so that it doesn't stick to this caulk. Okay, maybe I need to move some of this out of the way so that I can work. Give myself a now you think it's pretty thick right now, right? Well, as you start to spread it out and thin it out, it does just that. It thins out. It becomes the perfect thickness. Make sure you go all the way to the edge. You want to make sure you're covering all of the felt. And I'm drawing it away. I'm drawing it towards the edge. Okay, so now with wet fingers and a gentle motion, I'm very lightly touching this, and it's giving yourself kind of a gloss look. I don't know if that's being caught on camera. Probably got some backlighting. Okay. And then I can just clean my hands on one of these other pieces that I'm still planning on doing. Now I'm going to move this over here just so that it's out of my way. And then I'm going to take my plowed field template and I'm going to, now it's okay if I touch the edges, mainly because I'm going to smooth out all the edges once I plow it anyway. So I'm going to get down and I'm going to plow this field, right? And there you go. Now what that's done is that's created some ruts, right, that you can see. And when it dries, we'll go in and we'll paint that up. Okay, now before this is finished, I remind you, I'm going to wet my fingers and I'm going to go along the outer edge. I'm kind of beveling it in a way, but I'm also removing the ruts from about a fourth of an inch along the outer edge. So the ruts don't go all the way to the end. Or all the, I don't want any strange ruts right along the outer edge. I just want them, there we go. I just want them on the inside of the plowed field. Okay, so that was a stiff. That's a stiffy. Now we're going to do this guy, and he's flexible, so, and he's also a little bit larger, but I think the same amount of caulk will work. Just 2 squeezes. Now, because this is more of a flexible, it's not really stiff, it's going to be a little bit harder to work with. So, just bear with me as I try to work it. Keeping my fingers moist so they don't stick to the caulk. Working it into the felt, because the felt will actually absorb the caulk a little bit, like a sponge almost. Almost. Yeah, that corner just doesn't want to get any caulk on it. Yeah, the stiff felt is so much easier to work with than this flexible felt. Now you got to make your caulk a little thick in the center. Well, you don't want any felt shining through, because what might happen is it might crack if the caulk is too thin, right? Okay, so let me put this in a spot that I'm not going to want it to move from. And if the caulk goes a little bit over onto your wax paper, that's actually a good thing, and I'm deliberately trying to get that to happen. Because then it'll hold your felt down while the caulk is drying, and that's not enough. It's not thick enough. Because Alex doesn't like to shrink very much, but that's the key. Very much. It will shrink a little bit, so you have to be careful to try to prevent that. Okay, I think the felt is laid out pretty flat. I'm going to get another piece of felt here to clean my hands on, just so I don't waste anything. Now I'm going to use the trowel here, and we're going to plow some fields. And then we're going to go around the outer edge like I did before, beveling it, but also stopping the edge of the field from going all the way to the edge of the felt. All right, so off camera, I'll do the other two, and then what we're going to do is I have to let this sit for at least 30 minutes before I do anything with it. So that's where I'm going to do some creative editing, and then I'll be right back. All right, now another step that I want to mention is that I'm going to sprinkle some grit on the field while it's still wet. So I've got sand and talus in here, but I'm trying to not grab any of the talus and just sprinkle the sand on there, avoiding the big boulders, you know. Now, if you wind up sprinkling some big stones or something like that on there, you can always go in with a tweezer and remove those. Or you can leave them. Or you could have thought ahead and not put a mixture. And only use sand. Alright. So we're going to set that, now that it's got the sand mixed in, we're going to let that sit and we're going to let that dry. I'll be coming back maybe in about an hour to see how it's doing. And I'll catch you in a minute. Alright, we are back with our plowed fields. Now what we're going to do with our plowed fields is we're getting ready to paint them, but before we do that, I want to shake off or get rid of any loose sand that might not have either stuck to the plaster or that I might have mixed or sprinkled by accident on the sides here. So I got another box here. I'm going to attempt to recover the majority of the loose sand. Into that box. And you can see the field here has stuck to the wax paper. Okay, now let's see if I can get this sand. Might be a little more difficult. There we go. It all should be laying flat. Now with it stuck to the wax paper, that actually will help. It helped prevent the curling of any kind of felt. Now one thing about the felt is because the Alex soaks into the felt, it actually counteracts the folding. Where if it was sitting on top of, let's say, an MDF board or plywood, it would pull and draw the board up, right? But because it's soaked into the felt, there's when it shrinks, it's just tightening up the entire felt. Okay, so now we're going to put some dark brown on this. And I'm using this Rust-Oleum camouflage paint, and we're using the earth brown color, which is this color. It's a really dark color, and it's great as the base undercoat. This is not the final color. think of this as kind of a sealant. It's sealing the Alex and the sand, grit, and the felt, and everything. Now, if you notice, while I'm painting this, I'm painting over the edge, right? So I'm making sure that there's paint along the sides of the field. So, not trying to stay inside the lines or anything like that. Okay. This is a synthetic paintbrush, and it's got fairly soft bristles. So, softer the better, in my opinion. Because I don't want to scrape off any of the sand or grit that might not be perfectly attached, because this paint will actually assist in attaching it. But if I scrape off some sand, it's okay. Now, the next step after this, before I go into highlighting and doing any additional work, the next step will be me taking these fields off of the wax paper. And when I do that, there's going to be caulk residue that it's going to be a lot like flash or a mold line, along the edges of the field where the caulk had gone over and onto the wax paper. And so what I'll do is I'll take my knife and I'll cut all that excess Alex off to bring the fields back to their proper shape, size and shape, right? But in doing that, there's a little downside to that. By doing that, it will expose the white caulk underneath. Now there is a step that I could have taken, and that is I could have mixed some paint with the Alex in a mixing container before I applied it to the fields. And that way the caulk, or if you want, you could purchase pre-colored caulk, like some brown caulk. If you do that, well, it's going to be a lot more expensive. And then if you mix paint into it, that's just another step, and you might mix too much, and so that you will have wastage. So I don't do that, because when I do cut the edges off of these fields, and if it does expose any white caulk underneath, what I can do is when I go to the second level of paint, I'll just cover those holes with the other colors. Okay, and flock and everything else. So let's go ahead and let this dry. It's going to take about an hour or two, and then I'll come back to it and we'll crack on with another step on top of this. All right, I'll see you in just a minute. All right, I've given it enough time for the paint to dry, and so what we're going to do now is, well, I'm going to move these out of the way, and we're going to focus on working on this one on camera, and then I'll do the other ones off camera. But I'm bringing out my cutting pad because when I'm going to peel this off of the wax paper, There you go. Now you can see some paint along the outer edge where it is soaked up into the felt. And that's perfectly fine. But if there's any of this little, well, this one's actually really good. There's not a whole lot, if any, excess caulk that needs to be cut off. Just right there. Everything else seems to be in good shape. Okay, now when you cut it off, I don't know if the camera is going to capture this, but you can see there's a couple of spots of white that shine through. And that's perfectly fine. And then what I'll do is I'll cut these off. Shoot, why don't I just go ahead and do that right now? Okay, it's all cut off the edges. Yeah, this is the soft felt. And of course it's going to lay on the table very well. But there's a problem with the folds being so drastic that, or a potential for them to be so drastic that the caulk and paint is starting to chip or split. Soft felt. This one's doing okay. I don't see any cracks on this one. And this is the rigid felt. Okay, now I anticipated seeing the white shine through, but on this rigid felt I'm not seeing any cracks. Okay, that's good. Okay, I got a work box, put some paper inside of it so that I can work with these other pieces. Now, this is going to be multiple steps. This first step, okay, I got myself a little mixing cup, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to put some apple barrel nutmeg brown into that tubby, and then I'm going to mix quite a bit of water in there with it. 50% or so. And I've got a size 14 brush. It's about a ½ inch. Stir the paint in the water. By putting so much water into this paint, I've turned it into kind of like a not a wash, but it's going to be more like a mix. And you can see how I'm kind of I'm putting it on and spreading it around. Not going for complete coverage. Just going for like a camouflage ground color variation. It'll be darker in some areas. It'll be lighter in other areas. See that? So it's just kind of like a variety of colors. Now I'm going to take one of these soft ones. I'm going to do 2 of my soft ones. We could probably fit both of them in this box. Oh yeah, an added point to these fields, the one I just did, if there's any white shining through, I didn't think of this at the time I was doing it, but if there's any white shining through, I need to make sure that that's part of my agenda, is to get some of that brown on the white. To repair any of that. Now this has got a big crack right there, so I'm going to work this into all the cracks. So I'm holding it up so I can see where all the cracks are. There we go. Okay, so now the cracks are definitely taken care of. So now we just go with the rest. Again, give it a some in some areas, less in other areas. Try to avoid or to work out any brush strokes. So if you see areas that look like it's obvious brush strokes, go over that again to work out any unnatural brush strokes, giving it again like a 3D look. Okay, not bad. Now this one didn't have a whole lot of cracking. But I'm sure it has some white edges. So I'm doing this in kind of like circular motions, not straight brush strokes. And you can see, just looking at this one right here, that as the water dries, the pigment kind of disappears. So it's kind of like when you use blending. I'm just doing a little bit of blending. Okay, that's not cracks. Okay, that might be. I don't think that's a crack. I think that might be just a spot where my paint didn't, or I didn't paint it properly. All right. Go for some edging. And I'm only hitting the spots that are white. Okay, this one really had no spots that are white, so I lied. I mean, it looks like it's getting completely covered, right? Well, it's not true, because as it dries, the areas that have strong pigment will stay a lighter color, but it's hard to tell where those areas are going to be. And that's good. You want it to be you want it to be randomized. Okay. Some oval strokes, some round strokes, some linear strokes, some diagonal. Just go hog wild. Because again, this is just an undercoat. Okay, it's gonna take a minute for all 4 of these to dry. And once they're dry, then we'll move on to the next step on these plowed fields. Alright, you can see how the brown and the nutmeg, how it's been absorbed. So now I'm going with a second coat, but only in certain areas. And the undercoat's not dry, it's still a little wet, but I'm getting the impression that it's going to disappear. It's going to be absorbed into the other paint. Alright, so see what I did there? I added a second layer, so it lightened up those specific areas. Alright, we're back with the field now. I've got a little bit of paint in here from Folk Art Camel is the color, and I got my chipping brush, and I can see that there's a little bit of white shining through right there. I wanted to do a dry brush on one of these fields and one of these fields, and I'm going across I'm going perpendicular to the way the ruts are, hoping that the raised area of the ruts would stick out. So I'm doing one of each of the fields to kind of, mainly just to experiment and kind of see how it will affect the appearance when it's all said and done. I can compare the two, you know what I mean? And I also would like to maybe hit the outer edge with this camel color as well. Okay, so now you can, those ridges really stand out on that one, but that's okay. Okay, so now we got to let these fields, the 2 that I did dry brushing, the other 2 don't, not so much, but I want to just go ahead and let this dry for about 10-15 minutes before we start with the next step. Alright, we're going to be working with our fields, and I'm going to be flocking them with 2 different types of flock. So we're going to do the first one, which, well, we're going to do them one at a time, right? So we're going to do the first color, which is going to be the border of the fields, and that's going to be done with this blended turf earth blend. It's kind of a brownish green. So we're going to take one of our fields with our Elmer's. Now I'm using Elmer's and not Mod Podge because Elmer's is flexible when it dries, where Mod Podge becomes more rigid. Okay, so we got our Elmer's. Now, it's pretty simple. All I'm doing is putting a border all the way around. And it can be as thin or as thick as you desire. I personally am trying to make it about 1/4 of an inch. Now these fields are not going to have hedges or walls along their outer edge or outer perimeter. If you want a hedge or a wall surrounding your field, then you would have to make a hedge or a wall separate piece and then lay it next to the field to enclose it. And the reason why I'm not putting a wall or a hedge on this field or these fields is because I want them to stay flexible. Once you start putting walls and hedges along the edges, you're basically reinforcing them, making them stiff or sturdy. And I'm trying to keep it flexible. Trying to coat until I can't see any more white or gloss. And it's okay to put a little bit extra, because what it'll do is it'll soak down into the glue and you'll get a thicker coat. Okay, now without shaking it off or anything like that, I'm just going to pick it up and put it in another tub, another box right here. All right, so this is the extremely flexible field, right? I can pretty much, I'm not exactly sure yet, but I can tell you I think I prefer the stiff felt considerably more than this soft flexible felt. It just doesn't hold a good, I don't know how to explain it. I don't think the caulk stick to it very well, but I'm going to give it a chance. We're gonna fully complete it and then see what the differences are at the end. All right, same thing with this one. We're not going to let it just sit here in this tray. I'm going to pick it up and I'm going to put it in that tray. All right, now these last two, I'm just going to go ahead and do them both in this tray. And then I'm just going to leave them in the tray, and I'm not going to transfer them to another tray. These are the ones that I painted. Now, some of you might be saying, why are you using the earth blend and not the green blend? Because the green blend would be closer in color to my table. Well, that's exactly why I'm not using it. I'm using a color that is slightly off so that when it's on the table, you would be able to identify the boundaries a lot easier. And when wargaming, sometimes little subtle hints like that are a big help. But most likely there's going to be a hedge or a fence or a wall surrounding these fields, so that won't matter at all. But just in case, specifically when I play Meg, there's two types of fields. There's the field with the boundary, and then there's fields with no boundary. So these will actually work for fields with no boundary, like no wall, no hedge. And it's also a subtle transition from grass table to dirt field. Earth blend's kind of a good happy medium between the two colors. Okay, so before we can move on to our final step, I have to let this dry. And with the ulmers and the flock, it's probably 30 minutes at the most. So we'll come back in a little bit and we'll see how those fare. All right, I'll see you in a minute. All right, so we've got all of the flock cleaned off except for the flock around the edge. I've already brushed everything off. Now we're going to be going into the next step. I'm going to take two of these fields and lay them in here, and we'll do the second step on both of these at the same time. Well, one and then the other. But I'm planning on using this green coarse turf from Woodland Scenics. It's like blended turf, but it's very chunky. We're going to be using that to represent the crop lines. Okay, so we've got our Elmers and very little water, because what I did was I took the remainder of what was left over from doing the edges and then just added a little bit more Elmers to it to thicken it up. But it still has a little bit of water in there, but not a whole lot. Okay. So now I'm going to take these. This is a tester's brush. It's like a 1/4 of an inch wide, and I'm going at it at an angle where I'm using the wide edge to kind of just touch the top of these artificial ruts that I created using the plaster. And we're going to touch all of the ruts. And these are going to represent the crops. Now this is going to be pretty monotonous. It takes a while to do all these ruts. Now I'm trying to do the top of the rut and not get any of the glue down in the lower portion. And if I do, it's okay. Okay, so let me do all these ruts and then I'll be right back. All right, I'm doing the last rut right now, but I do want to point out that I kind of jumped around on purpose. I didn't do them one after the other. I kind of skipped a few lines and then came back, and what I'm trying to do here is wet some of the ruts that might have dried while I was doing other ruts. doing my best to get a good thick coat of glue before I start laying down the coarse turf. Now, if there are gaps in the glue, that'll be okay, because you don't want, because your crop is going to have gaps in it. Or you would, between the different plants. Okay, that should work. Now I'm going to take the coarse turf right here, and I'm just going to use my fingers to sprinkle it. And I'm trying to get the thinnest, the most fine pieces and scattered around over the entire thing. But I understand that there's chunks in this, so that's not going to be possible. Trying to make sure that every bit of the glue that I just painted down is completely covered, which I think it is. Okay, now I'm not going to rely on gravity. I'm going to use my hand, and I'm going to press down gently on the crop, push it into the glue, so the glue will have a better chance of gripping it. Okay, so that's not what it's going to look like when it's done. We're going to let that dry, and then I'm going to clean off all of the ruts. And then we'll see exactly what this plowed field looks like. All right, so let me go ahead and do all 4 of these fields, and then I'll be right back. Okay, so we've got all 4 fields covered in the coarse turf. It will take the Elmers probably 30 minutes to an hour to dry. So once I felt like it's dry enough, I'll go in and knock off all the excess foliage, and then we'll let that dry a little bit more, because right now this is preventing it from drying. So we're just going to let it dry, initial dry time. Then I'm going to shake off, without brushing, I'm just going to shake off the excess coarse turf in a little while, 30 minutes approximately, and then I'll give it another 30 minutes to completely dry before I go in and I brush everything off. All right, so I'll see you back here in about an hour. All right, now on these fields, I had knocked off the initial, like the coating, and now what we're going to do is we're going to gently brush these fields with a makeup brush, a makeup mop. And it should go fairly straightforward. Now, I'm barely going to touch this. I'm not scrubbing it. I'm just barely touching it. Now, the makeup brush is super soft. You can maybe hear, well, maybe you can't. The microphone's a million miles away, but you can hear the brush scraping against the field. I can hear it. I want to basically knock off all of the loose foliage, but also I want to knock off any foliage that would maybe fall off during gameplay as well. So, but I'm not going to sit here and scrub it and try to force it off. I just want to knock off anything that would probably fall off in the middle of a game. Okay, so we've got a field right here. Now what I'm going to do is, once I get them all cleaned off, I'll lay them on the table with some miniatures next to them, and we'll take a look at them and see exactly what they look like. Here's the second one. That one was the one I had dry brushed, and this is the one, this is the second stiff that's not dry brushed. Okay, so like on this one, you'll see gaps in the crop growth, but that's fine. That's perfectly fine. Now these guys are the super flexible ones. This is the one that's been dry brushed. Now, what's good about the super flexible is that if I was to ever place it on a gentle slope or a ridge line or something like that, it might be able to lay flat on the table over the hill. Yeah, this one looks a little wild. It might be because when I was applying the glue got down in the middle of the ruts. So some of the crops are overgrown. Okay, and then this one is the non-painted one. All right, so let me go ahead and clean this off, but also let me clean off the table and pull some figures out, maybe some hedges, just to give you the full Monty. All right, so I'll be right back. All right, so we're looking at the fields in a holistic manner here. I just basically put the fields down, and I put some hedges, and I put some roads down, just to give you an idea of what the fields might look like. Now let me lower this camera so that you can actually get a pretty good close-up of what the fields are looking like. These are 15 millimeter miniatures that I've got on here. Sherman Firefly, Tiger, Opal Blitz. I got a Pack 40. Yeah, and that's the fields. With the crops. Hopefully you enjoyed this video and maybe learned something, and maybe you can build some crops for yourself. To be honest, I think I like these two the best. They are my stiff. Those are the stiff fields. I'm not sure if I like the dry brushed one better than the dark one, right? The dark one, I don't know. I don't like this one. Kind of speaks to me. The one with the where I dry brushed the ruts. I think that one might be the best. I went ahead and turned on autofocus so that you could actually see the fields and things like that actually in focus. Yeah, I think this is my favorite one. All right, well, thanks for coming out and checking this out. And you can check out how I made these roads in my next video. And I'll catch you in the next one.